Well, John Hinderaker is president of the Center of the American Experiment and editor of the excellent Powerline blog, which I urge all outsiders to go to at powerlineblog.com. John is a regular here on Outsiders, and he joins us now from the United States.
Hi, Rowan. Great to be with you.
Great to see you, John. Now, we've got a few things we want to chat to you about, but firstly, I was intrigued. You reviewed on your excellent Powerline blog a book called Rigged about, the American election in 2020. Now, you and I have discussed this, and we've discussed this on the show before, but give us the rundown on this book and your thoughts on it.
Well, of course, as you know, Ron, there's been so much controversy about the 2020 election. A lot of Republicans believe that it was stolen. My own view, and the view of this book that you mentioned, is not that it was stolen through the Dominion voting machines and some of this legerdemain that some have alleged. But the election was heavily influenced and, in fact, rigged by a number of factors. Number one, the mainstream conventional press suppressed stories that were damaging to the Joe Biden campaign, like, for example, the Hunter Biden laptop that included evidence that Joe Biden is a corrupt politician. That was just suppressed. Two, social media. The social media giants did the same thing, skewing conversation to pro-Democrat, anti-Republican themes. Three, in a number of states, including my state of Minnesota, collusive, fraudulent litigation was used to illegally change voting laws to make it easier to commit voter fraud. It's a scandal that has been underreported. And then finally, Rowan, Mark Zuckerberg contributed hundreds of millions of dollars to cities and counties around the country to hire Democratic Party activists to administer their elections. And this went on in big cities all across the country. So there were a number of factors at play, and it led to a really dishonest election.
Yeah, and Time magazine boasted about it. James.
The big news here, John, and thanks for joining us, is in Australia is this new submarine deal between Australia, the United States, and the UK. I want to ask you a couple of things about that. Number one, to what extent is this on the radar of Americans, this new alliance with Australia and the UK? And number two, what is the reaction to Joe Biden now having apparently gotten the French very offside with the way that he dealt with this, and the French ambassador to Washington being recalled? They've recalled their ambassador to Australia as well. But is this being seen as another foreign policy blunder by the Biden administration?
Well, first of all, James, AUKUS has not gotten as much press in the United States as it deserves. China's military expansion in the Pacific is a huge, huge issue. And this is an important step that's being taken to try to combat that expansionism. And it has not gotten the play in the American press that it deserves. I'm not sure how many people are blaming Joe Biden for the fact that France is mad because its submarine deal got canceled. My own view is that was inevitable and a good thing. I mean, I think that was a solid judgment by the Australians. I think what Joe Biden has mainly taken grief for in the U.S. is forgetting the name of your prime minister. The prime minister is on the screen and Biden is talking to him. And that's a little bit embarrassing. You know, he didn't have the name on a teleprompter. And Joe Biden without a teleprompter is completely lost. But I will say in his defense, he did remember Boris Johnson's name. So 1 out of 2 for Joe Biden is not too bad.
Fantastic. Daisy.
Now, John, you mentioned that the election was stolen, shall we say, by certain legislative changes that made it easier for Democrats to cheat rather than Dominion. I couldn't agree more, but one of the theories I've heard is that the massive Democratic emphasis on mail-in voting plus lowering the standards for the acceptance of ballots could have contributed as well. What do you think of that theory?
Well, I think it's absolutely correct. I mean, the number of mail-in ballots, I don't remember the exact number, but millions and millions and millions. That's how I think most people voted in this election. In my state, as a result of collusive litigation that was immediately settled by our Democratic Secretary of State. It was a fraudulent lawsuit. They illegally eliminated the requirement that signatures on mail-in ballots be witnessed. So now if you got your hands on a ballot, you don't even have to have somebody witness your signature. You just sign somebody else's name and put it in the mail. And no, there's no way to know. Nobody knows how many fraudulent ballots got cast as a result of that kind of loosening of standards. But obviously some did, and we'll never know how many.
Yeah, exactly. Now, John, this General Milley character, you've written about him. So Donald Trump came out last week basically saying, this is the story where General Milley admitted that he would have, or the claim is that he would have phoned his Chinese counterparts if Donald Trump were to declare war on China. He would have phoned the Chinese to let them know in advance. That's roughly the story. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about it. But Donald Trump has accused this general of treason. And you, a lawyer, one of America's best lawyers, you've been voted, has agreed. He's guilty as charged.
Well, the story here is that Bob Woodward, who's not always a reliable source, has written a book, and it came out that in this book, Woodward writes that Milley contacted his counterparts at the top levels of the Chinese military and told them that if President Trump were ever going to attack China, he would give them advance warning, advance notice, so they would know about it. And Woodward also reported that Milley called a meeting of senior military officials in the U.S. and reminded them that if President Trump were to try to pass any illegal orders down the chain of command, they shouldn't be followed. Well, I read this and I thought that can't possibly be right. No American military man would call up the Chinese and say, don't worry, if we're ever planning on attacking you, I'll let you know. But then the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which Milley heads, their spokesman put out a statement that basically admitted that the story was true. And he said that Milley had been reassuring the Chinese. Well, yeah, it would certainly reassure them to know that they can't be attacked without prior warning from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And how our military could have declined to the point where a man like Milley could be the senior officer in the entire U.S. Armed Forces, it's absolutely shocking.
James?
But doesn't this also really play into the narrative, putting aside the 2020 election aside, that from the very start of his presidency, Donald Trump was basically the victim of a slow-motion, rolling bureaucratic coup that was attempting to undermine him at every stage of the game? I mean, it's so funny to contrast the treatment that Milley's getting versus, the treatment of, say, Vindman, and the way these guys are all considered as sort of heroes because of their undermining of a legitimate democratically elected president.
Well, I would say, James, it goes back to before the election. I think that the first major effort here was this Russia collusion hoax.
Yeah.
And this was started by Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee, and it was collaborated in by the FBI and the CIA, by the Washington Post, the New York Times, the entire American media establishment. And they kept this hoax going for years, even though they knew it was a lie. And this is one of the biggest scandals in American political history. It's not the only instance, but it's sort of the grandfather of them all, of how these people conspired first to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president and then to disable his administration once he did become president.
And John, just very quickly before we go, you mentioned, how could a bloke like Milley be head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, head of the Army? That he was the same bloke who was busy running around with critical race theory concepts and ideas of white privilege and gender fluidity and all this garbage. We have the same problem with the military in Australia. Ooh, better not tell the Chinese that. John, just very, very quickly, critical race theory, you've written on Powerline blog. The Biden administration are making it, if you don't believe in it, then you're out. Is that right?
Well, critical race theory, it's unbelievable. It's in the military, it's in the government, it's even in corporate America. We see in the United States employees being fired because they refuse to undergo so-called training that would inflict critical race theory on them, teach them that whites are no good, that America's a racist, white supremacist country, and on and on. And there are many places in America where you have to at least pretend to believe that, or it's going to be hard to hang on to your job.
Unbelievable. John Hinderaker, always great to chat to you on Outsiders. Thanks so much, and we'll speak to you soon. And I urge Outsiders to go to thepowerlineblog.com. Thanks, mate.
Thank you, Ron. Bye-bye.
Bye.